From Relay, this is Upgrade, episode 546. Today's show is brought to you by Ecamm, Oracle, and ExpressVPN. It is January 13th, 2025. My name is Mike Hurley, and I'm joined by Jason Snell. Hi, Jason.
Mike Hurley, it's amazing that this is episode 546, and just to let people in on a little behind-the-scenes secret, the document said 545, and Mike said 546, and I got really freaked out and had to go to relay.fm/upgrade to make sure that it was indeed. But we already did 545. That one's in the can. This is 546,
I will take
baby.
it further behind the scenes and say if you thought my energy was strange during the intro there, it's because I was clicking around tabs to make sure it was episode 546 or 545. So, you know, that's how it works around here.
I hope you're feeling better. You sound better.
Yeah, I feel much better. I feel much better this week. But we haven't got time for that.
If people, I've just got a little follow out here, which is if people would like to enjoy a podcast in which 2/3 of the hosts are sick, and therefore the non-sick host has to take over an unaccustomed role as the lead host, I recommend last week's episode of Connected. Also, if you like reading rules, there's a lot of those too.
Reading rules and not fully understanding them. I think that's last week's episode of Connected.
Yep.
Well, a ringing endorsement. I mean, who wouldn't want to listen to a podcast episode where 2/3 of people were sick and the other person was taking on a job that you hadn't taken on before?
I appear on that episode
You do.
from a phone call from my Apple Watch while walking the dog.
You do. That was very helpful. That was one of those things which I see this in other podcasts and TV all the time. I was talking to you. You couldn't hear me because you were on the phone to Stephen, but I kept addressing you, but that wasn't helpful.
No.
Now it is time for Snell Talk. No, now it is time for Snell Talk. Fine. I've already started. It's Sriram wants to know, do you guys like to hear your own voice when editing podcasts? I do not like the sounds of recordings which I host.
Okay. I like that Sriram says when editing podcasts and not like when recording podcasts, because obviously we like that because we do podcasts. The answer is I actually was in we had a radio station in my high school, and so I did a radio class, and then I hosted a radio show weekly for a year for my junior year in high school. And between those things and you're recording promos and you're learning how to read like voiceovers and cold reads and all those things, which I never thought would be a major part of my career. And I think about it literally every time I do an ad read, I think about that class. Anyway, it got me over listening to my voice real fast. And then I also made a lot of videos in high school. I was doing video for years and doing lots of editing of videos. And I got over it. Even before the era of podcasting, I was over it. And I find it almost charming now when people say, oh, I just don't like to listen back because I don't like the sound of my own voice. And I left that behind so long ago now.
Yeah.
I'm just over it.
It's not so far from me, but it is far, right? Like I don't know. I think I got used to it like 13 years ago. I've actually come all the way around on it now, though, where I am now very sensitive to my voice sounding different. So I'm so used to the sound of my own voice from editing myself and all that kind of thing, that if either like last week when I sounded sick, or if my audio, like from a podcast, sometimes has been compressed in a way, like I am very sensitive to that. Like I have a very good sense now of how my voice should sound, that I get very freaked out if I hear it done differently. Similarly, like I don't particularly like hearing to my voice sped up in any way. Like if you were to listen to a podcast in higher speed, because it just sounds wrong.
Sounds wrong. That's right. So last week must have been really rough for you.
It was. It was pretty bad. Didn't enjoy it. If you would like to send in a question of your own for us to answer on a future episode of the show, please go to upgradefeedback.com. And thank you to Sriram for this question. We have some follow-up. We have lots of follow-up. We have a response from the Bonnet company, the BBC.
Yes.
They shook a response out of Apple over Apple Intelligence notification summaries.
They did, of a sort.
I'm going to read Apple's response they gave to the BBC over the ongoing concerns that the BBC have about the way that Apple Intelligence is summarizing the headlines of articles. Apple Intelligence features are in beta, and we are continuously making improvements with the help of user feedback. A software update in the coming weeks will further clarify when the text being displayed is summarization provided by Apple Intelligence. We encourage users to report a concern if they view an unexpected notification summary. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we'll come back to the actual text of this and what it's saying in a second, but I will say hats off to the BBC. They've, I think, taken the charge on this. I mean, I know there's been lots of reporting all over the internet about having issues with this, but the BBC, they got to be in their bonnet over
Yep.
this, and they have rattled their saber into Apple has provided this.
Right. So the bonnet's off to them, really.
Yeah, bonnets off, bonnets off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know how this is going to do anything more than what Apple are currently doing. Like, what is this label? Where is it going to be? What is it actually going to suggest? Like, and if you have to show the label, like a label that's like, hey, this might not be right, is it even worth doing it in the first place? It's like the bigger, more existential question.
It's funny because we talked about all this and then that on Upgrade last week, and then just I think like an hour after we posted the episode, there was this response from Apple.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh no, this whole story. And then I read the response and I thought, oh, okay. Because this is the biggest non-response response that you could give. It reminded me a little bit of Steve Jobs saying, if you want a bumper case, you can have one. It's a just sort of begrudging comment that somebody felt they were forced to make. Because here's what they said. First off, emphasizing beta at the beginning and the end. I read that as them kind of saying, what do you expect? This is a beta. You should know that this is a beta. If you have a problem with it in a beta, file a feedback, essentially, right?
Yeah.
File a radar. We encourage users to report a concern because it's a beta, which I don't love because it's a beta in a final version of software that's shipped out to customers, that's advertised, and that they send out like notifications, right, to offer, turn on this feature, turn on Apple Intelligence, right? Like, so it's a beta. It's a beta as a shield to allow them to make statements like this, saying, "No, don't blame us. It's just a beta, and we're not going to apologize for anything that happens in a beta," which shows a lack of, basically taking ownership of your own features that I find kind of breathtaking. So don't love that. And then the other thing I don't love in this statement is what you mentioned, which is the software update in the coming weeks, which will put a warning label on it saying this might be wrong, or saying, I love Guy English suggested that perhaps they should just put an Apple logo next to all of them and put their own brand on the line and see how they feel about that. That would be really right. Powered by Apple Intelligence. Yeah, you can trust us, but don't trust us.
Yeah.
I don't know, because the solution needs to be, and we mentioned some of this last week, but like there are ways Apple could work to make this more reliable or to de-emphasize it. And the number one thing that I take away from this whole thing is not that that LLMs are unreliable, because they can be unreliable in specific circumstances, like trying to summarize a summary, a headline. But it points out to me that the rush to integrate these features led to them putting something in without maybe considering the best way to get the best output to users for news summaries. And that's because they rushed it. So it's they rushed to integrate Apple Intelligence everywhere they could in the OS. And this came up as like, yeah. Summaries, let's do it. We're really good at summarizing notifications. Let's make it happen. And I don't think anybody was saying I would really like my news summaries to be, or news notifications to be summarized. I'm not sure anybody was actually saying that, but it was an opportunity to put in Apple Intelligence, but then they just kind of slammed it in there, and they probably could do a more careful job of doing it, and they didn't. And this is the result. So the question is, what now? Right? Like, is the warning label the extent of what Apple's going to do here? They're not saying anything more than that. They probably aren't happy with it internally, I would imagine. But
They can't
I find
be.
it funny. But I find it funny that they resort to lashing out about the fact that come on, it's just in beta. It's like, how many Apple Intelligence ads are on the TV? How many ways are they trying to push this feature to users and use it to sell iPhones, and then to hide behind, oh well, but it's just a beta. Come on.
I mean, I can tell you what's going to happen here. They're going to ship this, and within a week, the BBC is going to write another story. Because this is not
Sure.
going to solve the problem that they have with this. The problem that the BBC and other people, like users and other outlets, have with this is it often enough gives wrong or
Yes.
misleading information.
I think the way I put it in my piece last week was for a certain percentage of the time, it turns information into misinformation.
Yeah.
And it's just,
Or like,
and and I think this is the story of the AI era, which is for the BBC, the threshold of turning information to misinformation is 0.
mm-hmm.
What is it for Apple? And it seems to be maybe none, right? Maybe they
Yeah.
just don't care, but that's a problem, right? That's a problem that the summaries are turning information into misinformation. And there are ways around it. I wrote a whole piece follow up on Tuesday
Yep.
about just the issue of summarizing headlines. Because what I don't want this to turn into, people will do it anyway, right, is just have it be about LLMs being bad. Because it's not about LLMs being as bad as this anyway. Maybe they look, they make mistakes. They do. But it's a summary of a summary. That's the biggest problem here, is the way it's implemented is poor. Because you're taking 6 or 7 words written by somebody summarizing an article, and then your LLM is turning it into 5 words or 4 words. And
yep.
And if you so there's this app Artifact that went out of business, and you could mark any headline as clickbait and have it rewrite the headline. What it did was it read the story and then wrote a headline. And I spent half an hour on Tuesday pasting the text of news articles into ChatGPT and saying, write me a headline with these specs based on this story. And you know what? None of them were wrong. All of them, I would say, were okay as headlines. I'd say that a couple of them got the emphasis of the story wrong. And as a headline snob, as a newspaper and magazine editor for many years, as a headline snob, I always rewrote the headlines. I was like, no, these headlines. I have very particular ideas about headlines. And so a couple of those ChatGPT headlines I looked at and go, no, that's not what the story is about. You missed it. But the fact is, none of the ones I tried got it factually wrong. And that's because they had the whole story to consume. And that's part of the problem with what Apple built here, is that there's not enough data to summarize headlines, because headlines have no context, because they're headlines. The context is the story you're supposed to read based on the headline. And
yes,
and
because
they just
as you
messed it
said
up.
in your article that I really liked, like humans aren't good at headlines either, because there are external forces now that push people to write
Right.
bad headlines, where the headlines are just to make you click.
I
And so, like,
hate to be
if you're starting with clickbait, like you're not starting with a good spot anyway.
Right. Well, that's the worst scenario, right? Is that the headline is also bad. And different organizations have different, like some news organizations are good at writing good headlines, and some are very bad at it. The thing that I find distressing, and again, I come across sound like an old man, but the fact is I was rewriting people's headlines in the early 90s, right? So, okay, yes. I think there's a whole generation of people, these kids today, no, a whole generation of people who were brought up, basically, they were forced to write clickbait headlines, because that was the journalism in that era, in the web, the 2000s, 2010s era. So much of it, especially in the period where everybody's just trying to drive traffic, and now we've got more paywalls and things like that. But in that era, you had to write clickbait headlines. And so people were trained to write them. And so I see even today on sites that are subscription driven with paywalls that they write clickbait headlines. And it drives me crazy, because it's like, I'm paying you. Your headline should tell me whether the story is of interest to me or not to bait me into tapping, realizing it's not relevant to my life at all, and then tapping back. You don't actually get more out of that. I mean, I guess they have some ads on their pages too, most of the time, but it's like, really, if I'm a paying customer, you got to give me more. You got to actually tell me what's going on in the story, and then that should intrigue me and make me want to read more. But you shouldn't be trying to deceive me, but leaving out all that information. So it's the classic example of, like, this place is going to kill you if you go there, and you're like, uh-oh, I better click. And then you click, and it's like, this place is in New Zealand, and you're
inside
like,
of a volcano.
Right. Yeah, it's in space. It's space. It's Jupiter. And you're like, well, wait a second, I'm not going to Jupiter. Why did I click it there? And that's the problem with it. So yes, that magnifies this whole situation. Sometimes the headlines are really bad. But if you read the article, and that's what I keep thinking, is there is a way forward here, which is providing Apple's summarization system with more content. But if you're going to summarize a uh, short headline. So here's one example: the San Francisco Chronicle, a newspaper and website devoted to Northern California, wrote a headline last week, and everybody knows about this news story now, which is destructive California windstorm. Here's where the risk is highest. This is to Northern California readers. Well, of course, when you tap on it, you find that these are the Santa Ana winds in Southern California, in Los Angeles, hundreds of miles away, and they were destructive. As we know, it's a terrible situation in Los Angeles right now. The ChatGPT rewrite of that headline, by the way, is Southern California braces for extreme Santa Ana winds, which is what the story is about. But the San Francisco Chronicle is like, what if we make all the Northern Californians afraid that they're going to get a windstorm, so that they tap on our headline, even though it's a paywall, so they have to already be giving us money so that we can deceive them into loading a few crappy ads. Again, it's bad. But ChatGPT did a fine job with rewriting that headline. So I think the issue here is not just the pure badness of LLMs, which some people want to talk about. The issue is this is a bad feature implemented badly by Apple. Like, that's what it is. Like, Apple has a tool, which is an LLM, and they applied it to a place where it doesn't belong. That's the problem.
Because you've mentioned it, I will say, like, I don't know how helpful it is that your favorite tech podcast talks about things that are happening in the world, but like, for me, obviously, like, I think anyone that pays any attention to me and my life, like, obviously knows how much I love LA County, like, and how much time I've spent there in the last 5 years. And I'm devastated by the fires. Like, it's so horrific and so upsetting. And I know people who have been moved from their homes or have lost homes, like, just like, people I'm friendly with. Everyone that is in our circle is fine, that I'm aware of, at least. And it's just, oh my god, it kills me. I feel so bad, terrible. And that it's not even done.
Like, the pattern continues. Yeah. It's absolutely terrible. Lauren's from Southern California, and in fact, when she was in elementary school, she lived in that area. She actually lived just north of Sunset Boulevard on Curzon. So, in the evacuation warning area, I guess, and right, like, you could literally walk up into those hills right there that where there was fire. So, it's definitely affected. Obviously, so many people. As a Californian, these things happen, and it's terrible, and it has to do with all the things that make us love California and want to live here. Are also things that can do terrible things in the back. We had a fire like this. We had a few fires like this. One very close to us up in Santa Rosa and Sonoma County. And suffice it to say that in our house, there's been a lot of. We already have a go bag, and we tested it out because we got that tsunami warning a few weeks ago. We're like, all right, well, let's use this as practice, because it looked like the tsunami was not going to happen. But we're like, well, where are the cat carriers, and where's the go bag, and what's all that? And this is another reminder of how tenuous life in California can be, because we are at the whim of our wonderful climate. It is also our terrible climate. Both of those things go together. So nobody's talking about. This is the truth of it. It's January, and it's like sunny and pleasantly warm in LA this week. That's why the fires are happening, right? And they haven't had any rain this winter, which we've had a lot of. So a lot of terrible.
It's very dry.
But it's like, so and what do you do? It's also nature, but obviously all of us feel terrible for all of our friends and really everybody else in LA who's affected by this. It's awful.
Yeah, like, just on that, like, I saw Lucas Shaw at Bloomberg in his newsletter wrote something that I just felt so perfectly encapsulated it. I want to read it. It says, "What makes LA so magical also makes it vulnerable. The dry desert climate exposes vast areas to the risk of fire. The tectonic plates underneath our feet mean semi-frequent earthquakes. Living in Los Angeles has always meant compromise. You accept the heightened risk of natural disaster to reside in paradise." I'm just like, oh my God, how beautiful. Like, how beautifully written, and it encapsulates it so much. So I just wanted to mention it because it came up, and just, obviously we both have a connection to that area. And so it felt like I wanted to say something.
For sure.
This episode is brought to you by Ecamm. Ecamm is the leading live video production and live streaming studio built for the Mac. You're like, what? Someone builds these tools for the Mac? Yes, they do. Ecamm does. And this isn't a Mac app for Mac app lovers. It's not just live streaming, though. Ecamm is great at simplifying many workflows. It's incredibly simple. You can get started so quickly. It's got everything you need to create just about anything you want with video. The Ecamm app lets you do it all, whether you're streaming, recording, podcasting, presenting. Maybe you're presenting something over Zoom and you want to have some graphics up on the screen with you. Everything is there in Ecamm. It includes support for multiple cameras, for screen sharing, and a live camera switcher that lets you direct the show in real time. You can stand out from the crowd with high quality video. You can add logos and titles, lower thirds and graphics, share your screen, drop in video clips, bring in interview guests, use a green screen, and so much more. Ecamm Live does it all. Ecamm's members are entrepreneurs, marketing professionals, podcasters, educators, musicians, church leaders, bloggers, and content creators of all kinds. And Ecamm for Zoom is now available for anyone on the pro level plan, so you can automatically send Ecamm's live audio and video output into a Zoom meeting, Zoom webinar, or Zoom event. And it adds up to 8 Zoom participants to use as camera sources in your broadcast or recording. Plus, you can automatically create individual participant audio and video recordings and add Zoom chat messages to your broadcast or recording as text overlays. Before I found Ecamm, before I found Ecamm Live, I mean, I've used Ecamm products for years, but before I found Ecamm Live, it just wasn't possible for me to stream from my Mac. You just couldn't. It was impossible. Macs just couldn't do it, and they built the tools to mean that you could. And now, while there might be other solutions out there, they do not feel like Mac apps at all. And
Yep.
that's what I love about Ecamm Live is that it works and feels like an app that has had love and care built for and by people who use the Mac. So if
Mm-hmm.
you, like us, and I know Jason, you
Yes.
use Ecamm Live too, like if
All the time. I'm a subscriber. I use it for our Six Color stuff and our Total Party Kill stuff. And the reason I chose it and chose to pay for it is because it is a Mac app through and through and has a bunch of really great features that are hard to match on this stuff that feels a little weird and runs a little sluggishly because it's a
Yep.
cross-platform app. This is just all native Mac. It works really snappily, and I've been using their Zoom integration lately, which is amazing because I
Yep.
I used to do a screen capture of a Zoom window and use that to put people's faces on a live stream, and now you can just assign people in a Zoom chat to boxes in the
So
layout.
nice.
It's amazing. Amazing.
So nice. Don't just take our word for it. You can get a month of Ecamm Live for free today. Just go to ecamm.com. That is ECAMM.com and use the code UPGRADEFM. That's a whole month of Ecamm Live at ecamm.com with the code UPGRADEFM. Go there and check it out. Our thanks to Ecamm for their support of this show and Relay. Let's get back into some follow-up.
Yes.
I saw this going around. I saw some 9 to 5 Mac. Semiconductor analyst Tim Colpin is
Analyst.
reporting that TSMC in Arizona is now producing the S9 chip for the Apple Watch, or they're just about to. This Arizona plant is currently making the A16 processor, which is going into the older phones that Apple is selling. But
Right.
this is for right now, a chip that they need and maybe will
Mm-hmm.
continue to need in new products, and they're looking to make it in America.
They're less sophisticated production lines than the cutting edge 3 nanometer stuff that's in Taiwan, right? In fact, Mike, you might call these legacy nodes.
Whoa,
I
you know
know,
what,
right?
Jason? I would
You should
call
call them
that.
legacy nodes. But the
Yeah.
fact is that this is part of a much larger story about TSMC being given money, encouraged strongly by the US to build up some chip supply chain in the United States. Because there's a great fear that if all of the chip supply chain is in Taiwan and China attacks Taiwan, that would be extremely bad for. I mean, and the only reason I would disagree with that is that I think it might be extremely bad in so many ways beyond can computers be purchased.
Yes.
That I think it may not matter, right? But anyway, and so what would they make at the Arizona plant? And here is a great report about that they're making Apple Watch chips, they're making A16s, and I'm sure, it may be the case that it's always the more of the legacy nodes that get built. Obviously the cutting edge stuff gets built in Taiwan, and then they kind of roll it down to the stuff in the U.S. But still, I also wanted to mention, actually, since you brought this up, there's a great New York Times story we'll put in the show notes about the people who've come from Taiwan to help set up the factories in Phoenix, and how that has transformed the area around the plant. And there are people who are like from Taiwan who lived in other parts where there was like a Taiwanese community in a far off part of Phoenix, because Phoenix is enormous, who have come to this area to set up businesses and to help make those people feel more at home and adapt. And
Tiny Taipei in the desert, they call it, which is
yeah,
a beautiful phrase. I like that.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And the goal is, I mean, obviously the goal is not to have just a bunch of people from Taiwan come to Phoenix and make chips, because the goal is to have American workers working on it too. But the challenge is that the TSMC people are the people who know how to do this. And so there's this the mixture of the people from Taiwan who are working for TSMC and then the people from America. It's just a great little story. I thought it was really well reported about all the cultural issues that are involved with moving from somewhere very far away with a very different culture and plopping down in the desert, and what does that mean, and how do you
Yep.
live your life. And it's a really interesting story, so we'll link to it in the show notes.
Yeah. I mean, and this is, you're saying, like, TSMC, they get a lot of benefits to doing this, and then companies like Apple can ride that benefit. Like, this benefits Apple because they can say, look what we're doing in America. We're back into that again. But I don't disagree with the premise anyway. Like, even if you take out the we're worried about Taiwan part, I do think that there is a benefit to, if you can do it, having these things around the world in different places, creating jobs for people who might not be otherwise working these kinds of fields. Like, I have no problem with that. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
This morning, you sent me a YouTube video for the Genmoji ad.
Yes, because you said you hadn't seen it.
Yeah, I had not seen it. So I saw it for the first time this morning. It's a good ad.
It's a good ad. It's very catchy.
It's a good ad.
Catchy.
It's a good ad. It's a catchy ad. I would love to know, and I don't know if anybody out there can tell me the answer to this. I'm not convinced that these are all actually Genmoji.
So there is a disclaimer on the ad.
Okay.
And I think it says Genmoji animated by human animators or something like that.
Okay.
But that is a question, right? Are those really Genmoji at all? Did they start as Genmoji, or did they kind of get there later? I don't know.
It doesn't matter to me. Like, I'm not like, oh, this is like a scandal, but like, because some of them do genuinely look like what the stuff that I have made from Genmoji.
Yeah, so it says static Genmojis, comma, professionally animated.
Cool.
So
I'll buy that then.
I don't
I'll buy
know
that then.
if they used a higher resolution Genmoji pipeline in order to get them to look better for TV, but I think the implication is that they are Genmoji. Now, how many thousands of them they had to generate before they got the ones that were good enough to then have them professionally animated? But I think it's a really effective ad. We've been talking a lot about Apple Intelligence and the ads, and that it's a beta and all those things. I think this ad is the best endorsement of Apple Intelligence that I've seen. Which is,
because Genmoji is the best feature.
Yeah,
that's why
they're fun. and the song is an earworm, gets stuck in your head, and it's all just, you're going to be thinking about bucatini with some peas, Socrates on mountain skis for a long time after you watch that ad. So, and I watch football, so I see it every commercial break.
This song, I can only imagine there was two briefings, which was, can you make a song which is kind of part We Didn't Start the Fire, if that's the name of the song, right? Is that the name of the song?
Yeah.
Yep. Right? And part Technologic by Daft Punk. And then just smushed them together and you came out with this song. Like, that's what this song is. I think it's a bit more Daft Punk than anything else. But yeah, this is like, oh, what if we made our own version of Technologic and then just made Genmoji for that? I think that's what they're doing there, and I like it. It's fun. It's a good song, and I'm actually happy that they made an original song to do this.
Yeah, it's a band called The Dare. It's a which is actually a guy. Okay. It's a guy whose band name is The Dare.
That's fun.
But he has actually he's like from New York club musician and DJ, I think, and that's cool, right? Like I think they did. It doesn't. What it doesn't feel like is a kind of like silly commercial jingle. It has the
Oh,
vibe of all of
he's
those
in it.
cutting edge songs that Apple does for
They
ads.
make a Gemoji that looks like this guy at the end.
Yeah. See, there you go.
That's fun. That's fun. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
he obviously
it's
wrote this
well done.
song for Apple for
He
Gemoji,
did.
right? Like
He did.
there's no way that he made this
No,
before.
I mean, actually, I was thinking if you did make this song and then somebody at Apple heard it, they'd be like, "Oh my god, that's perfect for Emoji." But I was like, probably not, right?
I've got to
But
imagine that he made
it's
this
still
for
an
them.
earworm, and the ad is fun, and it's like, oh yeah, you can make like ridiculous things. A horse wearing a tie, sure, you can
Okay,
do
this is
that.
pretty great, Jason. In
Yeah.
the description for the YouTube video, they have the prompts.
Oh, look at that. That's
You know
amazing.
what? Apple, whoever made this, bravo. You thought of everything. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
did this
that's a
work? It's
winner.
like, no, they have got all you have to do is find the pieces. They put it all out there for us, right? Like, oh, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh no way. But Eggman was fried egg with arms and legs, poodle shopper, pink poodle holding multicolored shopping bags, sunglasses walking. Like it's the actual prompts, because like they don't make any sense in English, some of them, right? Tomato face emoji wearing long body trench coat, hat, glasses, legs, red hands.
Right.
Bravo. Gotta say,
Yeah.
bravo.
Handsome horse in black suit and tie with flowing mane.
Hmm. So I guess you could try and make them yourself, right, based on these prompts, just to see how it comes out. But I really like this ad. I think it's a good ad, and it really is, in my opinion, the only ad they should have made about Apple
Yeah, right?
Intelligence, because the rest of them they've not engendered kind thoughts, I think, from people
No.
in general on the internet. But look, this is like Gemoji, because Gemoji is basically fun and harmless,
Yes.
um, where a lot of the other stuff, there's a lot more quibbles to be had by it, and this is a good ad
Mhm.
to show off what it can do.
Yeah.
You wanted to talk about Script Debugger.
Yeah, just really quickly, I wrote about this last week. This is long-term follow-up for Upgrade. Like
Okay.
really long, like episode 338
Whoa.
of Upgrade, which for those who do not remember that far back, I can tell you that is the episode where we stopped using call recorder. By sponsor Ecamm, they moved on to better things with Ecamm Live.
Well, they didn't
Uh,
have a choice.
well, they were getting pinched by Skype on one
Yeah.
side and by the operating system on the other side, and they decided that it was over and they shut it down. And that prompted me to write an article as well, which was called "The Mortality of Software," which contained a meme that I had forgotten existed, which is Simone de Rochefort, who used to be a relay host.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Thanos and Child Nebula meme where it's, did you drastically reduce export times with Apple Silicon? Yes. What did it cost? Everything. And it's a picture of his call recorder. His call recorder couldn't make it. Couldn't make it to Apple Silicon. Was getting squeezed by Skype, so we gave it up. And my piece was basically like, okay, apps come and go, and it really sucks when an app you rely on gets discontinued. It
Mm-hmm.
happens, but it stinks. It's a lousy thing to have happen. But I thought at the time, and this came up again this week, and what prompted me to write that article is there are also a lot of apps I rely on and love, and that a lot of Mac users rely on and love, that are indie apps, and they are
Yep.
they're the product of one or two or three people, a single person or a small team, and those people are human beings. Not only are there all the risks, I mean, very sadly, remember there were those great shortcuts utilities that were written by Alex Hay, and he passed away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in that case, they actually, the group that picked them up, including our friend Rosemary, worked with his family, and but a very difficult situation to even do that. A lot of times I think that in situations like that, it's just over, right? The code just disappears and is gone. That's a rare kind of success story of being able to pick up Alex's legacy. I mention all this because Script Debugger from Late Night Software has been around for 30 years. It is what it sounds like, which is if you were somebody who wrote AppleScript scripts like I did, it gave you a debugging platform that was incredibly useful. You could stop, and check the variables at any point. It gave you output. of where all the variables were and what they were, so you could figure out why AppleScript wasn't working right. Which, boy, that is required because it's often so impenetrable. Just an incredibly useful utility. Um, and the fact is that its authors are retiring, which they should. Like, if they can retire, they should retire. But it means the app is going to not be updated anymore. And they're doing a very nice thing where they promise updates for any issues in the next 6 months. And then at that point, they will, and they've announced that they're going to stop selling it. They'll stop selling it in 6 months. And then they will actually post like all the versions back to version 5 or something with serial numbers on their website. And basically say, if you've got a compatibility issue for a past, you really need a version that runs on this version of Mac OS or whatever, you can have it, which is great. Like this, so the right way to do it. But the bottom line is that the next time there's an OS update that breaks script debugger, you can't use it beyond that point. That's just the truth of it. And look, if AppleScript was a thriving world that Apple was putting lots of like time and money into, and it was a major part of Apple's strategy going forward, it would probably be a viable reason for somebody to buy this business and move it forward. But
Mm.
it's not. It is also kind of fading away. I haven't even used script debugger like a fraction of how much I used to, because I've moved so much of what I do to shortcuts and to Python. But ironically, I used script debugger the very day before this announcement came across my timeline. Um, because I was being frustrated by something in AppleScript. I was like, what is happening here? Let's go into script debugger and figure out what I need to do. So, so it's a bummer, but again, it just reminds me of that whole mortality of software thing, which is I worry that the Mac as a platform has a lot of go-to apps that were built in the early days of Mac OS 10, or maybe even the later days of classic Mac OS, and they're indie apps, and they've been put together by small teams or individuals. And the danger is that all of those apps are of a certain age, uh, and their developers are of a certain age. And if something happens to them, or they just say, I'm going to retire now, which they have every right to do, the fear is that that's the end of those apps. And my larger fear is that so many apps on the Mac date from that period that the Mac has kind of gotten along with a lot of developer support from kind of the gray hairs of development, and they have provided a continuity. My counter argument would be the only people who care about those old apps are old people, and they'll all
Sure.
fade away together. We'll all retire together, and none of us will need BB Edit anymore or whatever. But I would say that's not necessarily true. James Thompson is like a year younger than me, and PCalc. Lots of people use PCalc of various ages. It appeals to all sorts of ages, but he's just one person writing that code. So I think when you have a platform as old as the Mac, right, 41 years old, and 25 years, as we said last week, for Mac OS 10, this becomes a risk. And also, I worry about just the sort of like, it's like an old car or something like that, where the miles add up. And I don't think Apple, right? Apple is not even that focused on it, the truth, right? Because Apple has been focused for the last decade plus um, on or just 15, 18 years on iOS platform software more than Mac software, for good reasons, but the Mac has been able to kind of get by. So anyway, it's just another one of those signs out there that I was struck by, that it wasn't, we're shutting this down because we can't make any money at it. It was not, we're shutting this down because we whatever, because Apple's made it untenable. It was, we're shutting this down because we're retiring, and we can't open source it because it's got a lot of stuff in it that can't be open sourced. So it just has to go. A little like how, in a different context, James Thompson made Drag Thing go away. That was because of a technical issue, but this is not really a technical issue. It's just we can't do it. We're retiring. We're over. So something to keep an eye on, and it's just something that fills me with slight existential dread for being a Mac user, is other software that I rely on that has a developer. Again, they don't need to work until the day they die in their 90s in order to please me, right? They don't need to do that. They need to do what's right for them. And if they can retire, they should retire. But still, what does that mean for everybody else? I don't know.
It's big feelings for a follow up item, you know?
That's what happens. You go deep. You go back to 338 of upgrade, that far
Big
back. The
big
feelings deepen.
emotions, you know.
Big,
It's,
big feelings. You go deep, you get the big feels. That's just how it is,
yep,
Mike.
I understand. This episode is brought to you by Oracle. Even if you think it's overhyped, AI is suddenly everywhere. From self driving cars to molecular medicine to business efficiency. If it's not in your industry yet, it's coming fast. But AI needs a lot of speed and computing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? Time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a blazing fast and secure platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, plus all your AI and machine learning workloads. OCI costs 50% less for compute and 80% less for networking, so you're saving a pile of money. Thousands of businesses have already upgraded to OCI, including Vodafone, Thomson Reuters, and Suno AI. Right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to OCI for new US customers with minimum financial commitment. The offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies for this special offer at oracle.com/upgrade. That's oracle.com/upgrade. Our thanks to Oracle for their support of this show and all of Relay. So last week on the show, we gave our feelings about what Apple should and could do in 2025. Well, now it's Mark Gurman's turn to do the same. So Mark published his first kind of newsletter for the year, in which he broke down what he is expecting to be the entire year's worth of stuff. And I want to go through the big highlights here, because there's some reporting we've heard before, some stuff, little tidbits that are new, but it's always interesting to kind of look at what is your feeling on this if you know a bunch of stuff. Right?
Okay.
We're giving our vibes, right? Like this is what we think might, but what happens if you actually know? So we're going to do this kind of chronologically. The first updates that we're expected to see this year would be new versions of the MacBook Air featuring M4 chips. This Mark spoke about this, and it actually made me think about me and Stephen were talking, I think, over the weekend about like the M2 MacBook Air. Does that replace the M1 MacBook Air, like in Walmart and stuff? Like, is the M1 going to go away? Because Mark talks about like the M4 probably will replace the M3, and the M2 he thinks will remain, not that the M3 will shuffle down. And I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I sent you and Steven a link because you guys were having that conversation about how the M3 MacBook Air was $899 at Amazon. Like, what? So I feel like the question of what happens with the MacBook Air line is really interesting, but I think their margins have gotten to the point where they could kick the M1 and M3 out of the product line if they wanted to, make the M2 cheap, and then introduce an M4 and be fine.
Yeah. Some new products are likely to come in the spring. The iPhone SE is expected to be the highlight of that, with the modern design, with Face ID and Apple Intelligence support. Mark mentions that he thinks that the new design and some of the new features could push the price up, and says that they could maybe keep the old device around. And I just think this is a terrible idea.
Yeah, no. So if you look at the way he worded that, I think he shifts from knowledge to punditry in the middle there.
Yes, he does. He does.
Where he's like, I think they should keep the old device around and push it down to $200 for some markets. And it's like, okay, well, you can think that, but are they going to do that or not?
Nice. Yeah, I don't think
so. I mean, a device that doesn't run Apple Intelligence that's got a Lightning port on it. I mean, I don't know.
Here's the thing. Here's what I'll say. I could imagine a scenario where, like what we were just talking about with the Walmart MacBook Air, that there are some parts of the world where they keep the old iPhone SE around and it's sold through certain partners at a really cheap price.
Yeah, you definitely don't see it on Apple's website, and it's not part of their marketing, but you can still get it in certain markets at a low price because that market needs to have an entry iPhone at that price. Yes, and I agree. That could happen.
At this point, if they have not found a way to make like a Face ID design phone for this price, I don't know what's going on. Right? Because there was a time where a Touch ID based phone cost a lot of money, and they did it for a long enough time that they got the price down.
But Face ID started in 2017. Okay, right? right?
Yeah.
So that's 7 years ago. Well, six plus years ago because it was in the
Yeah.
fall with the iPhone 10. Okay, you should be able to get that in your base model phone now,
Yeah.
right? You should be able
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
There's got to be a way. The first, I mean, have they upgraded all the specs in the latest Face IDs? Well, maybe they go back to the cheaper, more readily available, not quite as great version that
Mm-hmm.
they put in that they can put in this version. But yeah, that seems to make a lot of sense to me. Just I they could do it. They could do it. They may have to forego, as with any hardware redesign, you have to forego some of your really sweet margins on the product that's been in the line forever. I get
Yeah.
it, but that's why you waited 7 years.
And also, this is a product that you know is going to be around for a super long time. So,
Hmm.
could you not? Is it not possible to think about the profit margin in the long term rather than
Hmm.
just in the short term?
And it's an important product for them. It really is important
Yeah.
for them. And keep in mind too that they can't sell the current model's not on sale in the EU, for example, right? It can't be because it has Lightning on it. So like they need to
Mm-hmm.
get it out there, having a base model iPhone to get people in the store, to get people to become iPhone customers who might otherwise not be in the ecosystem. There's so many reasons to do it, and so yeah, it's time.
I really look forward to only partly the all of the moratoriums for the home button that will be written on that day.
Oh, the memorials of like
Yeah.
RIP home button.
Mm-hmm.
It's like can somebody will work up on like an AI generated image of like a tombstone where the home button has been
Yep.
laid to rest in the family plot next to the headphone jack.
Well, I always
Somebody work
think
that out.
about the Verge article about the MacBook Air design,
Hmm.
like, and how they were sad that it was gone, like in a way that like I just don't understand.
Yeah,
Like the MacBook Air's wedge is truly gone, and I miss it already. That
yeah.
article didn't make any sense to me. I know it's all about
Nope.
opinion, and like, it's written by Victoria Song, who I is one of my favorite reporters at The Verge, but you can't agree on everything, and I don't agree on this one.
Well,
But
also
yeah,
let's be clear. A Verge piece has a weight, and a piece by Victoria Song has an extra weight to it,
yeah,
and that is that story was a classic blog post, which is look, I know that it doesn't make sense, but I'm just sharing some vibes here, which is
yeah.
boy, I loved that wedge shaped MacBook Air, and this is the end. And to frame it as The Verge decries the elimination of the wedge, it's
Sure,
like
sure.
I, I'm sure they didn't mean it, but I rolled my eyes at it too. I'm like, come on, like that's just progress. That's just the world moving. Uh,
Yeah.
but again, I think that the point was just, hey,
However,
things move
I
on. Scripted
I
bugger
will
gets
say
discontinued. It happens.
I will say though there is somebody in my house who I know feels this way, so
Yeah.
I guess I can't say too much. And it is a point of contention in my home that Adina really does not want to update her M1 MacBook Air because she much prefers that design and to mine in a way that I
Yeah.
cannot
No,
get my head around it, but
I
that
completely
she
disagree.
prefers it, and I don't
I
understand
was the
it.
world's biggest MacBook Air fan, but like I
Yeah,
love the new design so much.
it's the
I
best.
I rolled it down. So this is part of the story. That just a little sidebar here. Now that I've got my MacBook Pro, Lauren's got my M2 Air, and Jamie's got the M1 Air that Lauren had that I had previously. So that's gone down to another one. She was on an
Well,
Intel MacBook Air, so bad, so bad. Oh my god, it was the computer we got when she went to college.
hmm
And oh, if you can just imagine a MacBook Air of that vintage, a 6-year-old, 7-year-old MacBook Air, Intel, going to an M1, huge jump for her. It's great, but I was struck by the sentimentalism, I guess that came out in this moment when I was migrating computers. Because first, Lauren says to Jamie, you take good care of that thing. That was my computer. I really loved it." And I thought, well, I mean, come on, that's silly. And then Lauren sat down on the couch like a couple of days ago with my old M2 MacBook Air, Midnight MacBook Air, and was doing something. And I was like, oh, I have those feelings too. You better take care of that thing. I
I
love
mean,
that thing so
I
much.
have such a strong attachment to my M2 MacBook Air. Like, I love that computer so much. It. I don't
Yeah.
know. I've probably mentioned this in the show, but like, I put stickers on that laptop. I've not done that in a long time, but I'm just like, no, I'm good. Like, this computer's moved in with me. Like,
Mm,
we're not going anywhere. Like,
yeah.
genuinely like I can imagine. Like, I will use this MacBook Air until Apple takes a big jump with the MacBook Air again. Like they have to make a big jump for me to want to move because I just for what I am doing on that computer, it's like
Yeah.
it's perfect.
So just also as a little note, as part of this computer exchange process,
Yeah.
um, I went to Etsy as I do and bought
Uh,
a rainbow Apple logo sticker and affixed it to the Apple logo on my MacBook Pro.
mm-hmm.
And in a quiet ceremony, while the migration was going on, the Apple Rainbow decal was removed from the
Yes.
M2 MacBook Air because you need to tell those two things apart. And the rainbow one is mine. So
Yeah.
that's how we did it.
And also, you're probably the only person in the house that has such a strong affinity for the rainbow
Of
logo.
course,
You
it's
know.
just that it's more that was a midnight, and I've got the space black, and they're close enough in color and shape at this point
Yeah.
that we need to be able to identify whose is whose,
Yep.
and so I get the rainbow, and I de-rainbow the other one, and Lauren can put stickers on it if she wants to, but
Sure.
I actually was shopping. There was a surprising lack of Apple. Well, I mean, because it's the Apple logo, but like the people on Etsy who do the rainbow Apple logo, I'm really surprised that there aren't more just like colored Apple decals that will go on
Hmm.
the shape of the Apple logo on a Mac laptop. Because I'd get Lauren, I found one, but they didn't have models. They didn't go to the trouble of the good Etsy shops, as somebody who's done this like 10 times now, have measured the exact measurements of every Mac model and the Apple logo on it, and they just put the model in your picker when you're ordering your
Hmm.
decal. And the one that I found that had like a purple or an orange or whatever, they just had dimensions. And I was like, oh, am I going to have to go measure the apple and see? I don't want to do that. But anyway, that would be cool because that's a fun way that even if you don't love stickers, you could, and Apple won't let you buy computers in fun colors. You could just put a fun color on the Apple logo. You could do that.
So going back to Mark's report,
Yes.
uh, kind of also in the spring, probably along with the iPhone SE, new versions of the iPad and the iPad Air. These will both get faster chips, so the regular iPad would probably get an A17 Pro for Apple Intelligence, and Mark believes that the iPad Air could go to an M4,
Mm.
which I guess makes sense. I mean, it's powerful, but it's going to stick around for a while. So
Yeah, and I know that the thought is always, well, why would you do that? Because that makes it less differentiated with the iPad Pro. I think Apple has shown that they kind of don't care that much, and there are so many
yeah,
other things about the Air in terms of compatibility with Magic Keyboard and in terms of the OLED screen, right? Like that the Pro has. Like, there's enough there
it's
that
it's
if the
vastly
Air ends up with the M4,
differentiated
it's fine.
at the
It's
moment. And also as well, don't forget that like the M3 was a bit of an ugly duckling kind
yeah.
of chip, so they
And M4, Apple's making so many M4s, right? And they're
yeah,
going to make even more with the MacBook Air when it
yeah.
goes to M4. Like M4 is the right thing to put in there, and then at some point the iPad Pro will get a M5 or M6, and it'll differentiate again. But until
Hmm.
then, there's plenty to differentiate those two products other than the processor.
The thinness is a
Yeah,
big one too.
thinness, OLED,
Hmm.
new keyboard.
Uh,
Although he says there might be they might update the 2020 Magic Keyboard, right? Which is what the Air currently uses.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
interesting.
He just says Magic Keyboard updates. So
Yeah.
what they will be, not entirely sure.
Yeah,
But
that's weird.
something, but
Mm.
something. A home hub device. So as a refresher of the specs, 7-inch screen can be wall mounted or placed on the counter. Mark Gurman was originally expecting a March release, but this could take a bit more time. A quote from his article: "The device's operating system, codenamed Pebble, is heavily tied to app-intense features. The features coming in iOS 18.4 and iOS 19, so it's plausible that the
Mm.
hardware itself will ship a bit later."
Yeah.
So there you go. There's a little
Yeah.
detail of how does this thing work. It's somehow going to use app-intense.
Right, which is a question because there's a whole it can't run apps, but like, does it run app intents and does it run them remotely, or what's exactly going on there? There's a lot of mystery here. This also is a suggestion that as the last remaining big WWDC features, the personal context and the app intents that are still not shipping, that you build a piece of hardware that's tied around them, and you're like, okay, can't ship it until you've got that stuff shipping in a product, which is going to be again 18.4. And the way he words this, first off, I think, well, one of two things is probably true here. Either app intents is coming in 18.4, in a limited fashion, and then they're going to kick the rest of it into iOS 19. And I do wonder about that. The other way to read this is it'll be in 18.4 unless it slips to 19,
Yeah.
which may be.
Yeah, it's a little uncertain because I mean, this is always a thing that we knew was going to be, limited in 18.4 because I think it's just certain types of apps, right? And then expected to expand. But any of the above could be true because, I mean, it's January now and there is not currently a shipping beta that includes any of this stuff.
No,
So
nothing. It's not in
how far do
18.3.
we go?
Yeah, it's a good question. By the way, I want to back up for a second. I do wonder if when there's a new version of the low-end iPad and the iPad Air, I do wonder if they will try something to get the iPad and the smaller iPad Air to be the same size so they can have a single keyboard accessory for both.
Yeah, why not?
Maybe.
Yeah, why not?
Because right now they've got that kickstand thing on the one, and then they've got the old 2020 keyboard on the other. I wonder if they might go to a single accessory that works with both of the small sizes at least, even if the large size remains using the existing. They could also change the iPad Airs to use the new Magic Keyboard instead, but they would have to change the dimensions in order to match. And they're too thick, right? I think that they actually can't do that, but we'll see. But that's a thought, is that maybe they're trying to sync up. The reason there's a Magic Keyboard update is they're trying to sync up the shape of their low end iPads so that they can use the same accessories. I don't know.
Yeah, because we've got a 10.9 inch and an 11 inch. They're the screen sizes, and so with that comes some slightly different.
Right.
I think just going to 11 inch on the iPad would be a good move if they can make it work.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's just the shape of the hardware and not the size of the screen, would be a way they could do it. Well, we'll see.
Mac Studio will get an update to the M4 generation due in the first half of 2025. The Mac Pro as well is expected, but the timing is not clear. I don't think it's gonna happen.
He really equivocated about this. Like, there might be a Mac Pro. He's what he's not saying is the Mac Pro will ship with the Mac Studio. Now he's certain the Mac Studio is going to update in the first half, but the Mac Pro is just a cloud with a question mark in it. Like, and I when I read that newsletter, I thought it sounds to me like summer or fall, and that's interesting. But yeah, they might skip it. I still am not entirely convinced that there isn't like a Mac Pro strategy hiding in the background where they actually do have a plan to differentiate the Mac Pro. But it to me, it's just as likely that the Mac Pro is we designed this case, so we might as well update the chips in it. But no, it doesn't make sense for anybody. We'll see.
As much as it hurts people, I just don't understand the business case for the amount of development that it would take to make an effective Mac Pro and how much they would have to add to Mac OS and Apple Silicon to make that work. And I'm just not sure that I see the business case for it.
I could see a partner too. They could do their little partner thing where they design something and then have somebody else sell it, where they say, it's the Mac Studio, and if you need those cards, here's our Mega Thunderbolt connection kit thingy that is being sold by Belkin or whoever, and you can put the cards in there, and then they work. I don't know. We'll see. I wonder if they're holding out for a future where they actually do optionally decouple the GPUs and do something very different in the Mac Pro. But again, nobody buys the Mac Pro. Sorry, fans of the Mac Pro. Essentially, nobody buys the Mac Pro.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one.
Quote, more conversational Siri would be debuting in 2026, but if we're following this chronologically, we will see it at WWDC. So this would be kind of around the middle of the year.
Right. They'll announce something for next year about Siri being better.
Yeah. And this will probably also tie up. I was thinking when we were talking earlier, I could imagine genuinely that we might, I mean, we spoke about this before, but just thinking about it now, we will still be getting Apple Intelligence features from iOS 18 post WWDC.
That could be.
Right?
That could be.
Because there are a few big stuff left, and we may still see that.
I feel like 18.4 will probably ship in maybe May, and we'll be like, at last, the last bill of goods from...
We'll see.
And then in June. But you're right, it could slip. It could slip.
I don't know.
It's possible. And the question, I wonder if what they're doing right now, to go back to that App Intense statement that he made. I wonder if the debate right now inside Apple is like, what can we ship now? I mean, 18.4 as a way to say, yeah, we shipped this feature we promised. And
Mm-hmm.
what do we boot out of this feature? Like app intents is an interesting one where there are whole like classes of app intents for different kinds of apps. And I really do wonder if they're like, if we're going to ship this, we can only focus on these limited sets of classes, and potentially some of the ones that they said they would support in 18, they just kick it to 19 and say, look, we know we need to do more, but we just can't. And so they
Yep.
focus on the ones that the hardware requires maybe, and the rest of them they just put it in the keynote again for June and see what happens in the next cycle.
Uh, Mark calls out one of the things for iOS 19 could be an AI-powered health coaching service, which could
He's been talking about that a
potentially
while, yeah.
that could potentially, depending on what that means, that could potentially solve an issue that I have with Apple's overall health strategy,
Mm.
which is they give you information but give you zero context of what any of it means or how any of it
Yeah,
works
yeah.
together.
It's true. It's true.
I'm not ready to talk about this yet because I've not given it enough of a college try, but in the last few weeks I've been trying out a Whoop band. You familiar with this company? WHOOP. They're
No.
like it's just a strap that you wear. And it's doing a lot of stuff. It's measuring stuff, and it's even pulling in data from my Apple Watch. And they actually take multiple pieces of information and give me suggestions about my day and how I might want to like use my energy throughout the day in a way that I wished that Apple Health would. And maybe this could be a step to that, but I also feel like I'm hoping too much from it, but nevertheless.
There's an ad, another effective, actually, I would say Apple ad is this ad called Quit Quitting. That's about, you quit your New Year's resolutions on the second Friday of January on average. And it's what if you didn't? What if you had? And it's an Apple Watch ad, and it's all about
Mm.
fitness. And it's a good ad. I mean, it's not bucatini with some peas, but it's a good ad. But what strikes me about it is like I get the aspirational aspect of it, which is like the Apple Watch will help you stick with your fitness regimen. It'll measure and all that. But when you talk about the AI powered health coaching and all of that, it strikes me that this is an area where Apple, with all of its data, does not really lend you a helping hand to. I mean, they'll do like, yeah, you closed your rings and stuff like that, or oh,
Mm.
you're a little behind on your rings. Maybe you should go for a walk or something like that. But it's dumb, and there's something better to be done with this. And if you look at that ad, you think of what Apple wants the Apple Watch to be, which is a companion that helps you get over the hump, not quit your goals, fulfill your goals. That's a health coach, basically.
Yes.
So they do need a feature like this, AI powered or not. They do need a feature like this that to fulfill what their clear aspirations are.
Talking about the Apple Watch SE will get a redesign. Don't interested to see what this is. I really want them to just make a plastic Apple Watch, right? Like, but I don't think they're going to do it. But I think it would be fun. And the Ultra, the Series 11 and the Ultra 3. Is it Series 11 or Series 12? Maybe it's Series 11? Yeah,
Oh,
I'm going to
that's
go with
this
that.
year would be a Series 11. Yeah.
Yeah. The Series 11 and the Ultra 3 will get high blood pressure detection, and the
Right.
Ultra 3 will get satellite connectivity.
So high blood pressure detection is interesting. So you can have hypertension and get medicated and all that, but also what will happen is this is going to be more like, not we're going to take your blood pressure and give you your details and send it to your doctor. It's more like if it detects that you've got high blood pressure, you're having a high blood pressure event. It's like having an AFib event or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They will send you an alert and say you need to talk to your doctor. And I have a friend that this happened to. He ended up having a very high blood pressure incident and went to the hospital and was in the hospital for a few days, and like
Hmm.
it's a whole thing. And so the idea that people who are, again, if you're maintaining, that's not what this feature is. This is one of those classic Apple features in a way where they're turning the weakness of the Apple Watch into a benefit, which is, okay, we can't act as your blood pressure cuff, but we can throw a warning when your blood pressure seems high And for some people, most of us, I think, are oblivious of lots of aspects of our health. To be told by the Apple Watch, you have a problem, talk to your doctor now. Tell them this.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
good.
Yep.
That's great. Yeah.
Yep.
Even if the answer is, yeah, you have hypertension and you need to go on this medication and you need to check your blood pressure every day, like your Apple Watch is not necessarily going to do that part of it, but it could do the warning part, which
I mean,
is, then there's a montage at WWDC about,
yep.
or sorry, at the Apple Watch launch about how it saved more lives. And that's, I mean,
every event,
that's the goal.
They put
I
one
know,
of those
but
in
that's
every
the
event.
goal. That's what they're trying to do. Like literally, if you ask the Apple Watch people and the WatchOS people what they're trying to do, they'll say sell products and save lives. Those are the two things.
I mean,
So,
and that kind of rules. I mean, like
yeah,
I had that thing. It's a very minor thing, but like, the Vitals widget that's on my home screen. I mean, I could see that I was sick, and like the device knows, like it knows because like, hey, look, something's wrong here, and it was right. I was sick last week, and my Apple Watch knew that in the level in which it can know that, which is like it could see that there were a couple of things that were out of line.
yeah.
The iPhone line, really the only thing of note is the iPhone 17 Air. It will be thin. It will feature Apple's own modem,
Mm-hmm.
an A19 chip, and a single camera. This was the thing
Yeah.
I've been wondering about. Like, there's been lots of rumors and back and forward, but Mark saying this makes me like, okay, that phone's going to have one camera. That is going to be complicated for people, I think, especially in our sphere, who might like the idea of a super thin iPhone, but with one camera.
Sure.
And Apple are betting that this will outsell the Plus, but won't outsell the Pro, which I think is the right way to think about it.
I think that this will be a winner in the way that the Mini and the Plus were not.
Yeah.
I imagine that they will put one of their versions of the 48 megapixel with the bin pixels,
Yeah.
so that they can do a full 48, or you can do a 24 megapixel with binning, or you could set it to a 2x zoom, essentially, which is just using the center portion, which gives you a zoom, even though it's not a camera with a zoom. I think that that's all good. He said that it'll be about as thin as the iPad Pro, right? So
Yes.
that's thin. That's really thin.
There was another rumor, Ming Chi Kuo rumor, that at its thinnest part, this will be 5.5 millimeters. The 11-inch iPad Pro is 5.3. So yeah,
okay.
That is genuinely like that 5 millimeter range. At the moment, technology of this ilk cannot be thinner than this. Like it
Right.
can't, because there are factors like buttons. Right?
Yeah.
Like if
They
you're
have to
going to have
depress.
any buttons, there is just a thickness level that they literally have to be at. So that 5 millimeter range seems like the absolute like thinnest a piece of technology can be. And I will say that iPad is so thin. And a phone that thin would be quite special.
It would be. And that's the thing is, tech nerds who want all the things will get the Pro. But a lot of people, regular people, and also some tech nerds, I would say, will say that the iPhone is so advanced now that that the giving up some of those features in order to get this super thin, awesome new thing is worth it for them. So I'm looking forward to seeing this product. I definitely think it will do better than the Plus and the Mini, because it's offering something more substantial than screen size differences. And I know it's like, well, wait, it's just a different dimension that's getting thinner. But like, yeah, I know, but I don't know. It's going to feel like no iPhone before it, and that has some value.
I'm going to make a mic prediction here, Jason. Are you ready?
Ready.
Stephen Hackett, Federico Viticci, and Marco Arment will all buy this phone. Not one of them will be using it before the iPhone 18 comes out. That is my prediction.
I love it. I love
those
the prediction.
3 guys are like in this realm, and like they will want it, and I understand it, but like they're all going to struggle with the problems that it has over time.
I agree. I think I want to say that one of them won't, but I think you're right. I think that that's exactly what's going to happen, is they'll all buy it and they'll all get a replacement for it before the cycle is up. Yeah.
Yep. Apple is working on adding heart rate monitoring to the AirPods Pro 3. Is something that Mark has reported about previously that we haven't gotten to yet and mentions in this again. Um, they're also working on temperature sensing and other physiological measurements in general. I find this to be an interesting one. Like I guess it would set apart the Pro models again, right? Because it has an extra feature that the regular AirPods don't. But
Yeah.
for me, I'm not sure who this customer is.
I
Like,
I think that the AirPods base is broader than the Apple Watch base, and that there is
sure,
also a certain percentage of them who do not overlap. And I think this is a way for Apple to basically start getting health data in from people who are not using Apple Watch. So it's not a huge selling point, I would say. I feel like it's more that Apple, as you buy these because you want a new pair of AirPods, one of the things that it's going to get you is more data in the health app, and that they want that to happen. But
yeah.
I don't think a lot of people are like, oh man, take my temperature in my ear, let's do it.
It's a nice to have, right? The heart rate monitoring in AirPods Pro. It's a nice to
Me
have, but
too.
I don't see it as like a potential, like a real selling point. Because like, for me, the person that I'm thinking of, right?
Well,
Because the difference here is this is only really useful for when you're working out. Like that's going to be the pitch for it. And it's like if you really
yeah.
care about your heart rate monitoring when you're working out, you probably have an Apple Watch.
Yeah, but some people might not, and I think
Yeah,
it gives value there. There's also heart rate monitoring for people who do not work out, who are like it where you're walking and your phone and your AirPods are measuring your exertion, and they can tell you things about whether you're getting in better shape or worse shape. I think there's also some warning stuff, like if they can do AFib detection or something like that, then they're
mm,
gonna throw an alert. But it is different in the sense that it's only when you've got the AirPods in.
yeah,
Right? It's not all the time with your Apple Watch. So it's less look, I like this. I don't think this is a game changer. I think this is more showing that Apple has realized that all of its products should have health sensors in them
yeah.
and contribute to the whole. I'll also say it's possible that if you've got an Apple Watch and you've got AirPods Pro 3 with these new sensors, that they are going to be able to coordinate, because I suspect some of the monitoring will be more accurate in the AirPods than in the Apple Watch, believe it or not. That there might be things that you could measure better in the ear, like temperature, than you can on the wrist, but certainly to make it more accurate by having two different data points. And I think Apple's goal is ultimately this constellation of devices thing where they've got data everywhere.
I mean, maybe eventually. I believe Mark Gurman's report is that it wouldn't be as accurate, at least to begin with. But that's
Okay,
to begin
I
with,
mean, we'll
right?
see.
Like maybe it works.
We'll see.
In
They
the
take temperature on in people's ears, so I wonder
he
if.
said not far off though
Okay,
was his.
all right.
So again, it's like it might get better over time. And like, look, Upgradians, if you have opened a thing to write to me to tell me you don't wear an Apple Watch but you'd love this, great. I'm not saying nobody wants this. My point is that like
Right.
it is the Venn diagram of like would like heart rate monitoring and does like an Apple Watch
And
like
doesn't have a tracker of
doesn't have
some sort.
yes like that is like a very small market to for
I
me
think that's their
for
goal.
features in one of Apple's most popular
Yeah.
products. Like that's kind of what I'm
I
getting
think
at.
Apple has to go into this thinking it's either additive, or they're going to be able to reach people who are never going to
Yeah.
who aren't fitness tracking and aren't doing any of that, and they can still get some vitals from them
Hmm.
and use it as part of the health app. I think that's got to be what their goal is. But I don't think it's going to be a selling point, right? Like I don't think that's part of it. The hearing aid part is a selling point. This other health stuff is more just like comes along for the ride, which is fine.
And then kind of the last timed thing in the year is that the MacBook Pro will get an M5 update, but not expecting much more. Mark notes that Apple is planning a bigger update for the MacBook Pro in 2026 as it marks the 20-year anniversary. Would you expect them to make a a big deal product wise at the 20th anniversary of the MacBook Pro?
No,
I don't either.
I don't think anybody cares.
No, I mean this is one of these things which reminds me of like remember that rumor of like the Steve Jobs edition of the Vision Pro? Like it feels like that kind of thing. Like I don't think Apple's making a big deal of the 20th anniversary of the MacBook Pro. Like that doesn't
It,
making a big change to the MacBook
it
Pro
it's
because of it.
it's literally just the anniversary of the Intel transition, because it was the PowerBook before then.
Yeah.
That's it. It was the PowerBook,
So I don't
and the
I'm not
PowerBook's
sure that I
existed
see
since
it.
the '80s. So
Like
MacBook Pro, it's literally the
maybe
name.
they have some new features next year for the MacBook Pro, right? But it doesn't. It's not like, well, we're gonna hold them for the 20th anniversary.
No,
Like I don't know if I don't think those
I
two
don't.
things match up for me.
I don't believe it. But he's talked about this in the past. Yeah, it's that they will eventually do a MacBook Pro that's got, you know, super
OLED screen
dual tandem OLED screens and stuff like that.
and
Sure, yeah, there's
cellular
room. There's room for there, and cellular would be great. Sure, yeah,
because they have
let's
their
do
own
it.
modems chasing
Let's
any
go.
day now. You know, any day now.
Any day now. Well, maybe that new iPhone SE or whatever it's called. We didn't even mention the fact that there's some speculation that they're not going to call it the iPhone SE, that they might call it something like the iPhone 16s, which I think is fine
I
because
don't agree with.
it says what features are in it, right? It says it's from the 16 line and it's from that era and it's got that chip and you kind of know what it is and it allows it not to be quite as much of an outlier. And the problem about like 16 sounding dated, it's like, well, they in an era where they sell multiple previous generations of iPhones, I don't think it's a problem.
I don't know because I feel like we'll be up to iPhone 20 and they'll still be selling this version of the product, and
Mm,
I think that makes a bit. I think that makes it a bit more complicated.
maybe, although it might also be that they're committing to update it maybe every 2 or 3 years instead of more than that. We'll see.
Maybe. Mark also says that throughout the year, at least, we'll get a new AirTag, a better range, new version of the HomePod Mini and the Apple TV that are quote built with Apple's new smart home ecosystem in mind.
Okay. All right. I still think that there may be an Apple Intelligence story. I got some feedback from somebody who was like, "What do you mean Apple Intelligence doesn't really make sense on tvOS?" I'm like, "Well, no, I'm thinking like Apple Intelligence on tvOS is things like uh it's related to things that tvOS does, or it's as a home hub where there's part of their smart home ecosystem is tagged with Apple Intelligence of we're going to control this or that. I don't even know, but like
Mm-hmm.
whatever they're doing there makes sense to get everything kind of up to speed. Thread radios and all those and whatever else they're doing as part of this forthcoming focus on the home that they've sort of not had up to now, which is great. Like it's past due, but great, bring it on. I did not love that that Mark Gurman referred to the Apple TV as a laggard
I
because
mean,
like technically it's so here's the thing, technically it's not a laggard, technically it is still by far the best, most powerful box you can buy for your TV. It's
yeah.
only a laggard because Apple won't sell a cheaper version to get their market share up. Now I would argue that at this point, again, they should really do that. You're never going to really compete with Amazon and Roku because they're not playing the same game. They want, they're selling you stuff or getting your data, and they're happy to make a some of those things have they're so slow. It's such a bad interface. I've tried them. They're not very good.
I mean, I
Apple
would
stuff
say
is
though that
is vastly better.
Apple is a laggard in other ways, and like the software is part of the problem. Like there are parts of tvOS that could do with a lot of work, and there are also things that tvOS lacks because Apple's unwilling to do
I
deals that people want it to
Yes,
do.
I agree with that. Although in most cases, if you compare it to what the state of the art is with the other TV platforms,
Yeah,
it's not like it's a laggard from the ideal.
yeah,
But
that's kind of what I'm saying. But yes,
there are very few features of Roku or the Amazon Fire stuff that I would look at and say, "Well, I wish I had that on Apple TV." In fact, the one that you mentioned, you alluded to, is some people have made a deal with Netflix so that Netflix is integrated into their stuff, and Apple just hasn't. And somebody needs to Apple needs to swallow their pride there because it really hurts their product. But in most cases, that stuff on the other side, there's like a live guide that Amazon I think has, and like look, they need to do more with tvOS, but just saying they're a laggard is weird to me because in a lot of ways they like if you use any of the other products you realize how much better Apple's hardware is, like just it's faster and more capable and more responsive than the stuff on the other platforms. But they are also, as Joe Rosenstiel has detailed repeatedly on his blog, there are so many areas of low hanging fruit for Apple that they just have not taken off the tree, like including like a live guide. That would be one of my number one features is Apple TV needs a live section that is properly like showing everything that's currently on anything that you've got that does whether it's a free ad supported streaming, or you get Peacock and you get 20 channels with that, and you've got ESPN, whatever it is, like, oh, that's such a great trend, and Apple's just sort of like very much living 15 years ago in that. So okay, I guess they're a laggard in some places, but I laughed because he tossed it off like, oh, what a laggard! It needs a hardware update, and it's like hardware update is not
Yeah.
Apple TV's problem, right? That's not the problem, because he was saying it in the context of there'll be a new Apple TV box, and like, great, but like, doesn't matter, doesn't matter. It's the software that's the problem.
I'll finish this out by reading a quote from Mark Gurman. It's likely that 2025 is ultimately remembered as a stepping stone towards more revolutionary products rather than a year of remarkable innovation. 2025 will set the stage for future years of advancements in mixed reality, smart home accessories, and foldable devices. Which I think is a good way to look at the year, maybe, right? Like if it does end up playing out that way, because obviously, they're laying some of the groundwork for some of the stuff they want to do in smart home, maybe, if that ends up working out for them. And also, if they're going to get to foldable, they have to first make an iPhone super, super, super thin. And maybe this is the way they get there. So.
Yep, I agree with Mark too. When I wrote my predictions column in Macworld for this year, I was like, oh, that's why the article ended up being, it's the year of Apple intelligence again. Is like, feels like a lot of that is going on, and then on the hardware side, it's just gonna kind of be mostly, other than like that home thing is really interesting, right? That home gadget, but most of it is going to be. The truth is, Apple's products are in pretty good places right now. They don't need, they'll put the new chips in them, and that'll be great. But like, I don't think this is a year where any of these products needs a big overhaul, and I don't expect that they'll get a big overhaul. We'll have that thin phone. We have the weird smart home whatever thing they're doing with that screen and accessories and modules or whatever, and everything else is going to be Apple Intelligence, Apple Intelligence, Apple Intelligence, and that's what this year's going to be, I think.
Yep. This episode is brought to you by ExpressVPN. How did you choose which internet service provider to use? The sad thing is lots of people have very little choice because ISPs have a lot of control in the regions they serve. They can then use this control to take advantage of their customers with dating caps and streaming throttles, the list goes on, but they also have the ability to keep logs of the websites that you visit, unless you use ExpressVPN. Without ExpressVPN, third parties could still see every website you visit, even in incognito mode. This could be your ISP, a mobile network provider, the admins of the network that you're connected to. The good news is ExpressVPN reroutes 100% of your traffic through secure encrypted servers so third parties can't see your browsing history. It's easy to use. You just fire up the app and click one button and you're protected. It works on all your devices from phones to laptops to tablets and more, so you can stay private on the go. And it's easy to see why it's rated the #1 by top tech reviewers like CNET and The Verge. This is a great reason why I use ExpressVPN whenever I'm on a Wi-Fi network that I have no access over, no control over, I should say. So when I'm traveling, I use ExpressVPN for multiple reasons. One, I'm connected to like an open network. I don't know what's going on with that hotel's Wi-Fi, and then I don't have to worry about it. But then it also lets me to change my location back to say that I'm at home again, so I can catch up on the TV shows that I was watching because it has the geo like blocking kind of workarounds. And it also is so fast, it's so simple, and especially on my Mac. I love it on my Mac because it's just there in my menu bar, like with just a couple of clicks and I'm connected. Protect your online activity today by visiting expressvpn.com/upgrade. That is expressvpn.com/upgrade, and you can get an extra 3 months free. One last time, expressvpn.com/upgrade to learn more and sign up. Our thanks to ExpressVPN for the support of this show and Relay. It's time for some Ask Upgrade questions. Today's episode, Adam writes in and said, I recently got my first Apple Watch for the holidays this year, and while exploring the settings, I found a hand washing timer. Do either of you use this? Do you know anyone who does?
Adam, did you miss COVID?
Look, here's the thing. If you weren't thinking about it at the time, it is weird to see now, right? Like, it made sense then. That was when they launched it. Even though there was like this rumor going around that Apple had apparently been working on it for a while, which I'd never believe. I'm sorry, I don't believe that, because why would you do this?
No.
But it's still there. I mean, for me at the time, it was helpful because it was just a reminder on my Apple Watch, like, that I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing. You know, I'm washing my hands. So I guess it's like 15 seconds or 20 seconds is the countdown. It's still on for me now, and I still see it and laugh every now and then. Because just like this idea of my watch doing the countdown for me. But yeah, it's there,
So
it works, and that's
it
that.
it was a crash program for Apple to build a COVID related feature into watchOS, and they thought they
Yeah.
could train their model to look at the accelerometer data on the Apple Watch, detect that you're washing your hands, and then automatically give you a timer to encourage you to wash it for the appropriate length of time. And they rolled it out, and as is sort of typical, first off, hand washing never goes out of style, but it took so long that like the heights of the COVID functionality that would have been nice in the moment, they sort of missed that, but it was one of the things that they got out to show like, oh, like we're doing this, along with the detection thing they worked on with Google that kind of didn't go anywhere. um that's what it is. I don't use it. I never did. I don't know anybody who does, but then again, I don't have conversations where I say, hey,
Do you
hand
use hand
washing
washing?
timer.
Yeah. So I always had like a thing that still happens, and I kind of can't believe it. Where like you get like the loud noise detection.
Got that yesterday at the basketball game.
Right. We'll talk about that in Upgrade Plus. Actually, I want to hear
Okay.
about that. The I get that from a hand dryer, right? So like I put my hands in the hand dryer, the Dyson hand dryer, and it sets off the loud noise detection thing. But it does it after a hand washing detection event. Now I feel like these two things should work together. Like if hand washing event, do not worry about a very quick loud noise for the next minute because it's probably a hand dryer. You
Oh,
know,
interesting. Yeah.
like I feel like they could
Yeah.
put these two things together.
But what if you were washing your hands while loading
Great point.
things onto a plane?
It's a
I don't
great
know.
point, Jason. It's a
I know.
great
Thank you.
point.
Thank you.
It's
That's
a
why
great
people
point.
listen to the upgrade program
Yeah,
is
yeah.
hypotheticals like that. So what if?
Matthias writes in and says, I recently got my first Apple Silicon Mac and was wondering if there are any useful iOS on the Mac apps. Right now, I use Overcast, but not really much more. Do you use any?
Oh,
This was a
wow.
feature that had so much promise, but nobody wanted to use it. Right? The issue was so many developers opted out of it. Like I went through the apps on my Mac today, my MacBook Air, and the only one that I have is Overcast. So
The ones that I use, and some of them are gone now. I use the MLB app, but
yeah,
they removed it
this
and
is the
said use our
problem.
website. And
Yeah.
the fact is, their website is pretty good, and their website is in fact more functional than their iOS app in terms of like multi-view and stuff. And I love a quad box. Um,
Starbucks.
Fubo TV, my TV provider, actually my former TV provider. Oh, they have an iPad app that I use to watch Fubo on the Mac, but YouTube TV, my new TV provider for now, they just want you to go to tv.youtube.com, and their web interface is very good and it's fine. Fubo has a web interface too, but I did like the fact that it was self-contained and not in a web browser. It was kind of nice. And Overcast, I use every Monday to check our MP3 files
Mm-hmm.
before posting the episode. I upload them to Overcast, and then I play them back, and I check the chapter art, and I check the chapter titles and stuff like that. I'm not sure there's more, although I feel like I've got an answer to this question, which is I've been using more stuff, but it's not true. I've been using more stuff using iPhone mirroring now.
Yes, that has kind of made it. iPhone mirroring and iPhone widgets and like all that kind of stuff has really made the need for this less.
Less, yeah.
Um, but definitely like there were apps that I wanted to use, and either what happened was it never got it just never got done. So like whatever, I just let it go. But there were a couple of apps that I wanted the iPhone versions of on the Mac. The developers didn't enable it, but that actually like encouraged them to make a Mac app. Like Timery is one of them, where
Right.
Joe of Timery
Joe,
Joe or Joe
Joe
Timery
Timery.
ended up just really going down the route of using Catalyst and
Mm-hmm.
making a Mac app, a Mac version of Timery, which is definitely better than what would have been just the iOS version on the Mac.
Right. Right. Because it's got access to the menu bar and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Jerry says, with the rumored launch of the new Apple Home devices with screens, where does the HomePod line go? Is there a future for both of these devices, or would the HomePod and HomePod Mini be discontinued, in your opinion, in favor of these new devices?
I think Apple's done the work to engineer the HomePod, and I think it will keep around. I think that the new device will be a HomePod. I think it will be called HomePod.
Mm.
Whether it is called, I heard a prediction on Connected last week, HomePod Touch,
Yeah, that
which
came
is
from this show. Someone wrote into this show and said that.
oh, interesting. Well,
Yeah.
my official Macworld prediction was they will call it the new HomePod.
Yes, I can see that too. I think HomePod, as we know it, is not long for this world. Like
But I
that
think
that thing.
I feel like those speakers will stick around. I think that
The
they
little ones, but I don't think the big ones
maybe
for
not the
very
big
long.
ones, maybe not the big ones, maybe the little ones, or maybe there will be a redesigned version that's kind of in between, that's more affordable. But
Yeah.
here's the thing: I don't think Apple wants to cede the home speaker market to the competition, especially because having if they're going to base everything on AirPlay 2 or things like that, or they've got a home strategy, a smart home strategy. They want to make sure that they're selling things that like give you the best experience. If they had a partner that they felt did that, I think they would work with them. But I don't think they feel that they do. So I think having some speakers you can put in your house is a thing that they're going to continue to do. Although again, the argument is if all of Apple's stuff works with the partner speakers, then Apple doesn't need to make speakers. It's just I think that that's not where they are right now. So I think
Hmm.
HomePod speakers will stick around. I'm very interested in the idea that you won't need a big HomePod anymore because one of Mark Gurman's suggestions is that this HomePod with a screen will have a speaker dock essentially that you can put it in. It's like the iPod Hi-Fi is coming back, Mike. Um, and that's interesting, right? Because that's the idea. Like you can put it on a wall using their little wall thing, or you can put it in a speaker, and then it's a HomePod with a screen at that point. But it's one product that does these two different kind of contexts. And he mentioned in his story also the idea that Apple actually thinks that they might be able to sell multiples of these. And I thought, well, if you can get the price down so it's not an unreasonable price to have these little HomePods in your house, you could put them in a couple of rooms and carry them around and do whatever. And that could be interesting. So I think they're revamping here, but I do feel like having a device or set of devices that will give you pleasant sound from Apple Music in your home is a thing that they still want to do.
Michael asks, having used the Vision Pro for several months now, do you think a Vision Pro monitor product could be an interesting, least viable product? How much of your use of the Vision Pro is outside of the vicinity of a Mac? Would this work maybe at $1,000? So, a bit more context around this. Basically, what if a Vision Pro, but it had kind of nothing inside, and it was essentially just to give you a very large screen for
Right.
a Mac? Do you think that that is an interesting product on its own?
I don't.
No,
And I
me
think
either.
the number one reason is the cost of the Vision Pro is the displays and the sensors, and you still need those for something like this.
Hmm.
I mostly don't use my Vision Pro with a Mac. In fact, I almost never use my Vision Pro with a Mac. I am almost entirely like if I travel or I've got a very specific context, I might use it. But I've got screens at home. I'm doing fine. I'm mostly at home anyway, and so I'm using it for other stuff. But even if you just said, well, what if Vision Pro focused on that? Like it would still cost too much money because it because of all the other things that go into it. So I like it as an additive feature that makes the Vision Pro more appealing to people over time and in certain contexts like travel. But the Vision Pro just needs to get cheaper, period. And although some of that can be done probably at the expense of features nobody cares about, I don't think you could make like a Mac virtual display that would be like the Vision Pro for a low price unless you could make the Vision Pro for the low price because of those displays, because of all the sensors that are required.
But even if you could, I don't think that this is a
No.
product that is really that worthy. Like,
I don't think Apple wants to make like X-Real glasses that have very
yes,
little like spatial tracking and you just plug them into your Mac and you've got a screen in your face. I feel like if X-Real wants to make that, that's great. But like I don't think Apple wants to make something like that. I think that they
like
have bigger
Mac
plans.
Virtual Display is a really nice feature of Vision OS. It
It
is.
is.
It is not the only reason to use it, and it shouldn't be. If that was the only reason to use it, they've kind of messed up. I
Yeah.
think. Um, there are other many good features a part of Vision OS. Even just like I just like using Vision OS. I think Vision OS is a very enjoyable operating system to use when it works correctly. You know, like when your eye tracking is working correctly, which it doesn't always, but when it does, and most of the time, it's like say like 90% of the time I have no problems. When I do have problems, it's like, oh, it's annoying. But the Mac is like a nice part of it. It shouldn't. That is not the product. Like you shouldn't have done all this and then just end up with this product that is just a monitor that you strap to your face. Like that's not really a worthy exploration, in my opinion, for Apple to have gone that far. Like maybe you know if you would have started with that and then built it out to what the Vision Pro is, then fine. I don't know why you would have done that, but that would have made more sense. No. The idea of like getting to Vision Pro and then just shrinking it down to this thing you can just plug into a Mac doesn't.
Right. And it's glasses
price,
or goggles or whatever that don't track your movement. And so there's just a big screen in your face and you sit there and type away. And like, that is that's more like X-Real glasses, it feels like to me. And I was like, that's fine, but I don't see Apple finding that to be a use case. That's not what we're going. I actually think a more exciting use case is a Vision Pro that runs Mac OS than a Mac with X-Real glasses attached to it. But yeah.
You can send in your questions along with your feedback and follow-up by going to upgradefeedback.com. If you have enjoyed this episode and think to yourself, oh man, they're wrapping up now, I'd like some more of it. Well, let me tell you that you can actually get more of it. Just go to getupgradeplus.com. You can sign up, you can support the show, and you'll also get more stuff. I want to ask Jason about his experience, which looked like what was essentially courtside basketball seats, which you posted with those guys. So I want to hear all about that. You can find the video version of this show by going to YouTube and searching for Upgrade Podcast, and we'll be there, and you can watch along with us if you would like to do that. Thank you to ExpressVPN, Oracle, and Ecamm for their support of this week's episode. But most of all, as always, I would like to thank you for listening. Until next time, say goodbye, Jason Snell.
Goodbye, Mike Hurley.